bigger one there. They told me that when I was selectman, the first thing you should do is buy a cushion.
Well, it does sort of raise you up a little bit higher, too.
Okay, are we good to go?
Almost.
Everybody set?
No.
Okay, I'll call this meeting of the Concord Finance Committee to order. It is 6:32 p.m. I see we have a number of members who are joining online, so we'll start with a roll call vote. I believe one of the members online is our clerk, Dawn, so I'll ask the vice clerk, Colin, to lead us in the roll call.
Okay, roll call. Suresh Bhatia. Okay. Peggy Briggs.
Present.
Kathy Kukula. Eric Dahlberg.
Yeah.
John Garofalo.
Here.
Pat Geyer.
Here.
Greg Garriello.
Here.
Don Kupka.
Here.
Thank you. Lindsay Liss.
Here.
Dee Ortner.
Here.
Carlin Reed, I'm here. Paul Rodriguez.
Here.
Kazi Sedruzaman. Shri Tupel.
Here.
Good. Lois Wassoff.
Here.
Thank you. We have a quorum.
Okay, thank you for that. I'm going to share the agenda on the screen. So we have another two for the price of one tonight. We're going to have a quick regular Concord Finance Committee meeting. Among other things, we're going to take a look at the updated budget projection, which is an input to that property tax implications table. That's agenda item number 3. Then we'll take care of some housekeeping, minutes, and correspondence. And then we're going to adjourn for a 7:30 public hearing. We have to adjourn because the hearing is posted for 7:30 for purposes of reviewing the capital plan. Stay in the same room. Okay? With that, let's start, as always, by inviting public comment. Do we have anybody in the room who'd like to share public comment? How about online? Any hands raised, Anthony?
None.
Okay. Moving ahead to agenda item number 3, the guidelines. Like I said, we'd first like to take a look at the latest budget projection, which the CFO shared and which we have in the packet. And then that's a key input to our tax implications table. So we'll take a look at the projections and then take a look at the table. So Anthony, I'll turn it over to you to walk through the highlights of the updated projections.
Sure, thank you. Try to make this as big as possible. All right, so you know, as I first said when I did the financial forecast, that it's based on a lot of unknowns, and as we receive more information, we've been updating this, and then we've been sharing it with members of the FinCom. So just to go through it, as far as on the revenue side, nothing's changed. We really won't need no state aid. The governor's not expected to. She's first, and I think that's scheduled for later in January, in a couple of weeks, so we'll start getting some state aid numbers. Other than that, revenues haven't changed at all from assumptions earlier made. On the general government side, we did for FY26, we just put in what the guideline number is from last year. So FY26 reflects a 2.85% increase over last year, and that's falls in line with the guidelines. And then for each of those years after 27 through 30, we based it on 3.5%, and that's what we determined that we were going to use for a carry percentage moving forward. So that's the town government section of the budget. Now, in the joint accounts, outside the guidelines, we're still at 12% for health insurance. We'll know more on that later in January too, for right now. And then the out years, we're hoping and use the 9% number. But again, that's probably going to change when we get to looking at FY27, but that's what we carried. Now, what we did also receive is some better information on property and liability insurance, on what we should plan for an increase. If you remember last year was a pretty big increase, like approximately 20%. Well, this year, they're trying to catch up on some claims that they paid out in the past. So this year, we're expecting a 14.4% increase. And what we did for all the out years is just continue to carry that 14.4, because that's just an area where we're not seeing, we came down from last year, but we're not hopeful. We are hopeful that it goes down, but we're going to carry it forward at the 14.4%. And moving down to schools, I adjusted the FY26 numbers to reflect the guidelines. Except Minuteman, I just left at 4% right now. And Concord Public Schools, their guideline number, that's actually not 2.8. Is it 2.85? I don't know. I think I copied and pasted. So
The CPS guideline?
yeah, the CPS
It's on.
guideline.
Final is 2.4.
Yeah, it's 2.4, so I cut, copy, and paste that, so I'll fix that, but, so I put in the 2.4, and then for the out years, we decided to stay consistent with the 3.5% increase, and then for the region, we did the 3.48 for FY26, which is in line with guidelines, and then on the out years, we just used the 3.5%. Other than that, there's the only other thing that we're going to talk about the capital, and that increased above the 3%. But as I explained, that's because of the contingency plan on road project that we have as a tier 3, and we needed to make sure that we had a fallback plan in case that was to fail at town meeting or at the ballot. So that's why that number is a little higher than 3% of the of what our policy would normally want. Other than that, everything is pretty much static.
Hey, Anthony, I have a question.
Sure, Sri.
Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
We can hear you.
Okay. Yeah, on the total, the fourth line, the total local receipts and other sources, it's gone down by almost 1.7 million, compared to 25. What is that number? And I just curious.
Yeah, I just looked quick at that. So, we're losing that money associated with housing prisoners at MCI Concord. We've benefited in the past couple of years on the interest rates. We've done really, really well, but now we're seeing a different direction. You're seeing the Feds lowering the interest rates, which means it's also going to affect what we get too. So that was decreased based on not seeing the benefit that we've seen for that. And then other miscellaneous, that's one-time revenue that we got that we just don't count on. So that's why that number is lower.
Okay. Yeah, because if the number is, comes to the original number in 25, it covers all your deficits, right?
Yeah, with budgets, we just don't know. There's a lot of variables.
Yeah.
So we always want to conservatively plan and, plan for the worst, hope for the best.
Yep. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Other questions for Anthony? Colin?
Anthony, I took a look at the revenue forecast, and the line item I'm interested in is the total local receipts and other sources. For fiscal year 26, it's projected at roughly $16 million. Your office presented us with a 5-year budget forecast 2 months ago on November 7th. And at that time, that number was about $2 million less. It was roughly $13.9 million. How'd you find $2 million in local receipts?
Are you saying for FY '25?
I'm looking at fiscal year '26. That particular line, there's a jump of $2 million in total local receipts, and it seems to be carried through for the next 5 years. And I think as a result of the extra $2 million, we may not be facing an override till after fiscal year '30. I would recommend and suggest that you check those numbers, and if you have an explanation for that, I'd appreciate finding out.
Okay, sure, we can look at that. I'm not prepared to answer that question right now, but one thing I did know, I haven't found the bunny tree yet in Concord, so it didn't just come up with 2 million, so we'll have to look into that compared to
Okay.
your number
Thank
of
you.
26.
Thank you, I appreciate that. And I have one other question, if I may.
Sure.
Okay. In looking at this, I know this is a high-level summary, but the expected carrying costs for the Peabody Middle School lands for fiscal year '26, from which line item or which bucket will those costs be paid?
It's not in there. Right now, that's not in there. That's one of the variables that's still outstanding. We're looking at that. We're gonna have additional insurance costs. We're gonna have additional liability with additional for utilities. We found out that they have a temporary pot that they're borrowing for the elevator, which we will now have to deal with because we can't not have a working elevator even though the building is abandoned. So that cost hasn't been determined. Right now, we're working with the schools to get past historical information, and then our facilities is gonna look at what we have to maintain for carrying costs. So I can't even begin to predict, you know, I couldn't even, insurance would be double on that building because they don't like insuring empty buildings and vacant buildings. So that policy will probably double from, I think it was like $17,000 to about $30,000, $35,000 for just insurance alone. So if I had to guess, we might be in that, you know, I think I mentioned after the finance committee meeting last time that we got an additional $81,000 when we bumped when you bumped up the guideline from 2.6 to 2.85, there was an additional 81,000. That's probably going to be eating up a lot of that by us carrying the PB school.
Got it. Thank you. That's all.
Other questions? John?
Yeah, sorry if I don't quite understand how this works, but if the town forecasts a deficit of $1 million and, you know, roughly $1 million every year for the foreseeable future, and the budget's fixed at town meeting, just what are the mechanics for dealing with a $1 million deficit?
So that means, so if you look in FY '26, that just shy of $1 million, that means we're gonna eat up into that unused levy capacity to that, and then so that leaves us with a unlevied capacity of roughly a little bit over $2.7 million.
So does that mean that just we raise taxes enough to cover that amount?
We're gonna raise taxes, right
Okay.
now that would be raising additional taxes to cover the $996,000, correct?
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Other questions? Anyone online?
Yeah, we have Terry, 1 second. Hold on, Terry. Terry Ackerman.
Terry Ackerman? Okay,
Yeah.
okay.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you. Whoops.
We can hear you, Terry. Go ahead, if you're still with us.
No, I think she just was switching over.
Okay.
Attending to panel.
Is that working now?
Yep, we can hear you.
Okay, sorry about that. It takes a long time to join as panelists. So I think I've heard that all three entities, the town, CPS, and the region, have agreed to live within the guidelines, and if that's true, I really appreciate that. And that there were a number of adjustments that had to be made to each entity to come up with the guideline number. And one of those adjustments for CPS, I believe, is the savings from the new middle school. And I'm wondering what number was used for that adjustment.
We used $500,000.
Okay. And where did that number come from?
That was an estimate that the schools provided. I know that number evolved. I think when the question of building a new middle school came before town meeting back in, I think it was 2019, the estimated
Right.
savings from consolidating into one was $548,000. It was over $500,000.
Correct.
But in subsequent years, the schools refined that estimate down to $500,000. And we used that number. We used the conservative figure that they provided, $500,000.
Okay, I didn't know that had been refined. Okay, thank you very much.
Okay.
Eric, can I just ask a clarifying question?
Sure.
Sorry about belaboring this point, you can turn my mic off, but if we're showing a negative and that has to impact real estate taxes, should the property taxes at the top just be a plug so we can see what the total true growth in property taxes is forecasted to be going out? Am I not thinking about that correctly? So instead of 124,411 in fiscal 27, are we really raising, 125 in property taxes? Because we have a deficit?
So the tax impact table, which we're going to go over next, depicts that increase in taxes. Or so you're saying should his budget for property tax receipts reflect that?
Yeah, that's my question, and if it's not germane, then tell me so, but.
Not at this
I mean,
point, though. Yeah, but it would,
I think the top line is artificially low here because we have a deficit, so the top line should be almost a plug, or it should be a plug, because that's how we'll fill that deficit, since we have to have a zero at the bottom, I think.
it would be adjusted. So next year, if the additional money that was raised would increase the levy, and then you'd see it next year. Right now, it hasn't been approved, so we leave it as is right now, John.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Anthony. And this, as you said, I mean, this is going to continue to be refined as time goes on. I'm getting ahead of myself, but I wanted to talk a bit about our calendar. What we're hoping to do is get a presentation on the FY26 budget in early February. I'd like to add a meeting to our calendar in early February for purposes of taking a look at the budget after it's presented to the select board on February 3rd. But we'll talk about the calendar at the end of the meeting.
Eric?
Again, I hope I'm not making a stupid question, but the overlay number for $500,000 what is that?
It's reserved
Looks
for
like an
abatements.
expense.
It's reserved for abatements.
Pardon me?
It's the overlay for abatements, property tax.
Yeah, so we're adding $500,000 to that overlay account? Why would we do that every year?
They tap into, they use the prior year and reduce, and it gets reduced based on the abatements that we place, so we replenish the money.
Well, I know what the overlay account is. I'm just questioning why we have to add $500,000 to it every year. Why wouldn't it stay flat?
Because it gets reduced every year, but based on the abatements that are approved and the STB cases and et cetera. So it's the same amount. It's 500,000 is the same amount for every year.
use that much.
Okay, I still don't understand it, but my understanding of the overlay account is if we have abatements or refunds, basically, it should equal out. And if we have more abatements, then the number is a plus number. Otherwise, it could be a negative number. Why are we adding 500 to it every single year? Why wouldn't it just be a zero number, plus, minus, back and forth,
I see a point.
correcting
Where's the
its own
plus-
self?
Where's the plus money gonna come from going in the overlay to play for the minuses?
I didn't hear you, I'm sorry.
Where is the plus money gonna come from to account for the minuses?
I didn't understand you, I'm sorry. Say that again.
Where would the revenue come from to offset the expense of abatements?
Over assessments.
I don't
Okay,
follow. I
that's
don't-
what you abate, I see.
Yeah, I'm not, yeah, it's for
Okay.
abate.
So you routinely have a higher, I get it, okay, did you get that, Carolyn?
Well, my understanding, following up on that, if I may, so you put $500,000 in it at the beginning of the year, you use some of it for abatements, and whatever's left over goes back to the general fund, so the next year you have to start
No.
back, you're back at a zero?
No,
Because
I
otherwise, you're building the fund up all the time.
And that's what Concord has done, right? Because didn't you, about 3 years ago, take money from the overlay to build up the middle school stabilization fund? Am I wrong with that? Yeah. So that's what happens. If that fund grows, we don't know what the abatements are gonna be. So when that fund gets to a point where it gets excessive, then we can go to the assessors to release some of that overlay, and it can be appropriated for any other way at town meeting.
We did that a couple of years.
Yeah, we did.
Remember, we did that a couple
We
of
did.
years ago, yeah.
What is that level when we trigger it? When we say we've got too much?
I don't have an answer to
It
that.
was around like 2 million or
2 million, yeah, it was a big number.
Yeah, it was 2 million, it was like a big number, and then we asked, and they said, yeah, they came back, approved it, and said, yeah, we can relinquish some of
Right,
this,
got it.
some of this money.
Okay, thank you.
Okay,
Yeah.
yep, we're good on that.
Okay. You
Got
can
it.
So, and my second question for Anthony, it looks like you basically, for 2026, you're using current and detailed information. And for the out years, 27, 28, 29, and 30, those are pretty much formula numbers? There's no,
26 is not actual numbers. 26 is a projection, too.
yeah,
But
26,
yes.
exactly, but
Yeah.
27, 28, 29, and 30 are formulaic?
I'm sorry? What was it?
You know, just plug number,
It was-
percent number?
Yeah, I think I based it on a 1%, 1% increase. Very
Okay,
conservative.
so those don't show any bumps in the road or any potholes, which are good potholes, you know, low numbers.
Right.
They just show flat, those are
It
flat
just shows
lines.
flat. You know, ideally, it'll be more than that, right? You know, we have the 250th. I didn't bump up net last year in anticipation of what I hope brings in a lot of money for the town. So, but I didn't bump that up because it's an unknown, you know,
Yep.
so.
So both the income and the expenses in the out years are strictly flatlined, and
Just a slight increase on the
Yeah,
local
okay.
receipts, yeah, just slight.
so we're, in 27, we'll be, or for 27, in a year from now, we'll be doing the same thing, only with a different yellow column for new,
Right, and
new
hopefully the
information.
numbers gets higher, right? The select board adopted that pilot policy, you know, we get to work on that. Hopefully we get find some new revenues and that helps solve some of these gaps that we have.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I see Don has his hand up. Don, we'll go to you, and then we're going to transition to the tax impact table.
Thank you, Eric. Anthony, my question is about the debt service within the levy limit. The town debt service within levy limit is increasing by $1 million in '26, and then decreasing in each of the each of the further years. Can you remind me what it is that is causing that large increase this year? And as I think about the tax impacts of all of our spending, this is getting to be pretty material, especially if it will in fact decline by $700,000 next year. Can you just remind us of the assumptions behind that? Thank you.
Don, I'd have to look into it. I don't, off the top of my head, I couldn't answer it. I just don't remember what it is.
Okay. Maybe then, along with that answer about the other revenue sources, to Carlin's question, you could also give us that breakdown for that line. Thanks, because that makes a big difference, I think, in our tax. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you, Anthony. We're now going to transition to a discussion of that tax impact, or that draft tax impact table that's included in the packet. And Lindsay's going to take the lead in walking us through that. Do you want to share your screen, Lindsay?
Or we can just bring up the table that's in the
Go through the packet?
if whoever can share that.
Sure.
Yeah, that's right.
Oh, sorry, Eric.
There you go.
You want to share?
I did, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
What's the page number? 7? Okay.
Sure.
Got it.
So we have attempted, this is, again, a draft, like we said, because not everybody on the committee, until it was in this packet, had a chance to really review what we've done here. So definitely want to hear everyone's thoughts. But we've tried to estimate based on current known information and known and approved debt. We've sought to estimate the median residential tax bill for FY26 through FY29. So to get to the kind of a starting point, we worked with the assessor to get the median residential assessed value, and we know the tax rate. And so we were able to kind of say, what is the FY25 median tax bill to start? So that's kind of that is a known number, that's $17,653. We then added the 2.5%. So, and then everything that follows is anything that's going to change will impact next year's tax bill. So things that are flat or year over year aren't going to impact us. So the big things that impact the tax bill are, the 2.5% levy increase, any digging into the unused levy capacity, as John was pointing out earlier, and then any changes in excluded debt service. So when we have flat debt service, so if we've got, steady principal payments for something, the year-over-year change, there won't be any year-over-year change, so that would be zero. But whenever we take on additional debt, and so our debt service goes up, or if we have debt service that has uneven kind of payment schedule, you'll see changes in that line item. So we start with that $17,653, and then each of the line items after that are taking, we took that 2.5% levy increase and translated that back to the median taxpayer. So, we just kind of made it down to like the single person. And then we looked at the excluded debt service, the additional tax levy use. So we just talked about how we're going to have that $1 million approximate, digging into the levy capacity between FY25 and FY26. It's going to be significant. So let me just go back to that. We'll go from having an unused levy capacity of about 5.7 million this year down to an unused levy capacity of 2.8 million next year. Because we went from a surplus of 2.1 million this year to a deficit of 996,000 next year. And then the excluded debt service change, and I think Don was bringing this up, in his question, or actually he was talking about debt service within the levy, but excluded debt service also, will also go up this year between FY25 and FY26. I believe this is mainly due to some middle school debt service, which after this year starts to go down, or it's school debt service, so whatever's in there after this year starts to go down. But the others, CCRSD, Minuteman, and Town have steady or slightly declining debt service between FY '25 and '26. So those three things, when you add up the 441 from the levy increase plus the additional tax levy use of the 424 plus the additional year-over-year increase in debt service for excluded debt, then you get to next year's tax bill, which is 6% higher, so 18,713. And then you'll see that the increases actually are much smaller in years 26 through 29. And part of that is, like we said, there's a lot of estimates here, and everything we vote on at town meeting affects all of the changes that we see here. So anything additional tax levy used, you can see how small changes in the guideline and small changes in debt can impact these numbers. So nothing is kind of set in stone in the out years. But to the extent that we have to bring on additional excluded debt for large projects like a new public works building or other items, that will significantly affect that excluded debt service change line item, which will affect taxes. So tons of variables in the out years, but so the FY '25 to '26 number is the one that we kind of have done the most homework on, for sure.
Can I just add,
Anthony.
Don, to answer your question, that debt within the levy increased 600,000 based on the borrowing for the projects that were approved at town meeting in FY '24. 23? So that's additional $663,000 of debt service payments on projects, pavement management, traffic signals and signage, heavy equipment, we bought a truck, and then the Aspet River Bluffs. That's the additional debt service.
Okay. Questions or reactions or discussion on the table that Lindsay just walked through? John?
Was I mistaken? I thought at the town meeting we showed or talked about 8% annual rates of growth in taxes, and this is showing 2%. So where am I mistaken?
So I haven't baked in any additional debt. I haven't baked in any assumptions that Anthony hasn't given me for budget projections. So I'm taking a very base case kind of view for 26 through 29. And even modest assumptions around adding to our debt or little changes in expenses. Some of these out years will change those numbers fairly significantly. So I have to say that this is, what we know, and what Anthony's been projecting. So anything so last year's might have been making some other assumptions around the out years.
This also doesn't attempt to quantify new revenue as well. I know we've talked about
That's right.
pilot, new commercial development. None of that is baked into this either.
Right, to the extent that there's more revenue, the additional tax levy use would hopefully, be much lower or would be a benefit to us. We would have a surplus.
Paul?
As I'm looking at this, would it be a fair assumption to say that we know a lot more for fiscal year '25, and that's baked in versus the out years? So that 6% could kind of represent that knowledge of an existing situation?
Yeah, we definitely know a lot more about this year.
Okay.
And I would say, so do I think that these are the real numbers for 26 through 29? No, they're if we don't do anything about public works, if we don't do anything, there are a lot of things that I think are going to make these numbers higher. So it's up to us if we want to show some scenarios maybe in our FinCom report around these numbers. But this is kind of like the base case if we did nothing. And if the budget projections we just reviewed are correct, this is what things could look like. But, yeah, you're right, Paul, so.
Colin and then Dawn has his hand up online.
So Lindsay, if we were to do a scenario that would increase the debt service to allow for the capital plan that we'll be talking about later on, is that a scenario that's something that we can model, or how would that look on this? For example, because we're going to be later on talking about a $15 million capital plan proposal, which will have debt service associated with that, and that debt service is going to be incorporated in these figures somehow. How would that
So the
look at?
largest increase would be that Tier 3 project that excluded debt for $5 million. So that would obviously impact the tax table. Actually, what we're looking to do when we get to talk about capital is, you notice that we're up at the 3% for paying out of cash, basically, for some of these projects. But we've, in doing that, we're looking to significantly decrease our debt within the levy from, we did, roughly $4.4 million or so last year to, I think with the plan that we're going to have, if the Tier 3 project passes, we'd probably be looking at borrowing, approximately 1.5 of debt within the levy, which, again, that's almost $3 million less of debt service within the levy.
I have no idea how that's going to look.
Okay. Dawn, did you have a question?
Yes, thanks. I just really want to make sure I understand. Lindsay, you're showing $86 of additional tax levy used is a negative 86. So in other words, we're adding $86 per from the average household to the unused debt levy capacity. Is this does that tie back to what Anthony showed earlier, where we're eating into our unused levy capacity by $996,000?
Well, okay, so, yeah, that's for FY '26 we are. In next year, he is also projecting a deficit. However, the unused levy capacity actually goes up slightly, and I'm just looking at the calculations for that. Because that's based on, you have to calculate the levy limit, and then you get to the projected tax levy.
I know there are a lot of moving pieces here, but since that unused levy capacity has become a key metric for us, that may be something we want to add to this table, and make sure that it ties, because it seems as though they're saying opposite things right now. At least to my eye it does, and maybe because I don't understand it. The other thing, and this question is for Anthony. Anthony, I guess we're adding, so that we have a line here of adding 2.5% to the levy, and then additional tax levy used, and then total excluded debt service change. As I understand the mechanism of the excluded debt, it causes a temporary increase in the levy limit. In other words, it's not actually outside of it, it's per se, it's calculated into the levy limit. Do we have a table that shows all of that somewhere? Because the reason I ask is I was wondering if that means that our levy limit is actually going to decrease as we pay off our debt, and we're thinking it's always increasing.
Excluded debt is added on for the life of the project, and yes, you will have a table, actually in the digital budget book, you'll be able to see the debt within the levy and debt outside, excluded debt. So yes, you'll be able to see that when we publish the budget book.
Okay, so Lindsay, that 2.5% isn't quite accurate in that as the debt gets paid off, the base comes down, the levy capacity comes down. It'll be interesting to just go one step deeper, I think, with that and see where we are. I agree, by the way, with John's comment earlier. This is quite a change from what we saw last year. I'm wondering if we want to add the assumptions here, for example, that this is assuming no new debt, et cetera. And then we can do the tax impact of the items we'll be voting on. Like, for example, I didn't realize last year we were adding $1 million of debt service within the levy limit within our vote at town meeting. And I think it's because we didn't, we just talk about it as being debt. We don't know, is it being paid back in 5 years or 50 or 25 years? And that's a big jump that I mentioned earlier is a big increase this year over last. And it'll, big swings, a swing of $1 million, $700,000, projected to be the following year, could create capacity or eat it up quickly when we're down to less than 3 million of capacity. So that's all. Thanks.
I'll just note, Dawn, we did include, it's in your packet, accompanying this is a short memo that lists out some of the key assumptions behind this table. As Lindsay said, I mean, this is a draft. This is a starting point. It's going to change as next year comes into focus. I'm sure we'll refine the assumptions as well. My intention in bringing this up tonight and taking a look at this tonight, it's intended to supplement the discussion of the final guideline now that it's been set. And it's intended to serve as a starting point for that 5-year tax projection we're required to provide in our annual report. So this will continue to change.
Eric, one more thing is your excluded debt is level payments. That's what the town decided to do. So you're not going to see a falling off of your excluded debt. You will see a decrease in debt within the levy, because as we add debt, we take debt off. So we're always a year behind. So your debt service will decrease within the levy.
And Don, to create this table, I'm using Anthony's, not only the projections we just reviewed tonight, but he also has levy limit projections, and those go out 5 years as well. So when I'm looking at unused levy capacity and how much we're eating into it, I'm using his estimates for levy capacity, and so that's pretty detailed. So I will add that to this sheet so you can see how that's calculated. And it does go up over the 5 years because like Anthony said, that excluded debt is relatively flat.
Greg.
Lindsay, can you just explain a little bit, because I'm not wrapping my head around the additional tax levy used number, where the 2.984 is coming from? Can you just go?
Yeah, so, all right, so I'm like, I was wondering if we should show that chart or not.
This one?
Yeah, okay, we can go back to here, yeah. So, oh, that's not showing. But unfortunately, you can go to your levy limit tab.
Yep.
So so the levy limit,
What this chart doesn't show, though, anything that we tap into the unused levy, because it's not projected out in the out years because we haven't done it yet. All we know is this is how the tax levy grows according to state law. Now, if we tap into the levy, the unused levy capacity, that is going to adjust the table next year. And then it could adjust it. It keeps adjusting. That's why it's really difficult to go through trying to project out property taxes, because there's a lot of things that are impacted. And it's decisions that you make at town meeting that are going to change next year, next year's assumptions.
So is that, so I'm not in the meeting, so I have a hard time seeing, Anthony, what you're showing here. Is that chart in our packet that shows where that number is coming from, or is it coming from somewhere that's not in our packet?
This was, the only time you've seen this is in the first presentation that I did in the forecast.
Right.
It would have been in one of those slides.
Okay, so that, the 2.984 number, Lindsay, is not reflected in the table in Anthony's stuff?
Right, yeah, correct.
Gotcha, okay. That's why I was having trouble.
D.
Yeah, I have a general question, and it pertains to the total numbers that you have in the top area. Can you tell me, what is your confidence level around your FY25 numbers?
You're talking about, okay, so in the tax residential.
In that
tax-
first block, the top block?
Yeah, so first of all, the 25 is based on the budget. That's not actual because we're still in FY '25. So that's what the budget that was approved at town meeting.
Okay. So,
That's the, I'm sorry, that's the 140 number? Total revenue?
It's
Which
everything
which
for
number
FY
is-
It's everything,
'24.
FY
Oh, I'm sorry.
25.
Oh,
25.
I'm sorry,
Everything
Lindsay's
is
table,
based on
sorry,
the budget
sorry,
that was
sorry.
approved.
Okay.
Okay, so, all right, these are estimates, but they're fairly, you have a fairly strong confidence in these estimates, I would assume,
For revenues, T?
in the FY '25 numbers.
I can't project what we're gonna get for revenue. You know, I'm hoping that maybe revenues come in a lot higher, and it's gonna be, it's
Okay,
gonna
you
change.
did say that earlier. Yeah, I get that, okay. But I'm kind of,
And then I would also say, didn't you say the capital that's in the budget for?
26.
For 26 is a contingency plan for the road project, right?
Right.
But will that show up in excluded if it doesn't show up inside the budget, so it'll show up either way for taxes?
It'll show as excluded, and if it doesn't pass as excluded, it'll show as $2 million within the levy.
Okay, so it's still gonna be here?
Yeah.
It'll be here. Okay, so that one is not gonna be a change.
okay,
So
so.
revenue seems like the big variable.
Okay, all right. I guess my thinking around this is that there's not a high degree of certainty about your estimates in the outgoing years, FY '26 through '29.
They're really conservative, Dee. Again, I hope that they're a lot higher, the revenues.
And I would say a lot of what people vote at town meeting affects those numbers. So Anthony can only project certain expenses, but some of the big ticket things will be things that the town decides.
Okay, so we'll have much better clarity after town meeting in terms of what,
Yeah, once we have a final, what's going to town meeting, what passes, then we adjust this table based on the decisions we made, and then that's our basis to start next year, and then the assumptions go on and on and on.
okay, so I guess I'm just wondering, okay, if I'm a person sitting at home and I decide I'm going to watch the finance committee meeting tonight, what's my takeaway from this draft FY '25-29 estimated median residential property tax impact table?
I think it's, what they could take away, based on what we know right now.
Yep,
Before any decisions are made at town meeting,
Yep.
this is what it looks like.
okay. And you're going to be showing an annual increase of 6% this year, and then a 1.6% in FY '26. That's what people are going to be seeing.
Yeah.
Right, but it changes, it's
Okay.
gonna change. That's why, we had that conversation last year, when people look at this, they hold it true to the vest, but it changes, and that's why I personally don't like it, but I understand it's something that the FinCom does, but it changes. We've seen the change from last year. There were different assumptions that were made.
Right, so is there a different way we could be showing information to them that had a higher confidence level? And it would only be for the current year, but is this the best we can do?
At this point in time, for what we are presenting, I think this is the best we can do right now, because this is all we know we think it's going to town meeting. the warrant hasn't even opened yet, and you never know what comes up, so.
Yeah, this is, it's early, Dee. Last year, I think we took a first look at this a month or so before town meeting. And we did the best we could last year. I'm not criticizing last year's FinCom, but we wanted to get this in.
You wanted to start a little earlier
We wanted to
this
get
year.
started
These are
early,
the
acknowledging
estimates.
there's a lot of assumptions, a lot of uncertainty. So these numbers will change.
As long as, well, you know, if the certainty level is 40% right now, that's something.
Right.
If the uncertainty is 90%, that's a different thing. So, you know, I think we should try to make it as clear as possible to the taxpayer who's sitting out there maybe watching.
Yeah, that's why, you know, we talked about when we met as a smaller group, to talk about some of those, you know, variables that are unknown.
Right.
Like, there's still that last tranche of borrowing for the middle school. Now, we've borrowed, you know, 90%, but there is gonna be that. What it is, we don't know yet. You know,
Yeah.
so that's not factored in. So, you know, we try to factor in what we know at this point in time.
Okay, all right.
And we
Thank
don't
you.
want to just throw the whole number in and throw a false number out
No,
there
I
either.
understand that as well, yeah, okay.
Okay, I see Lois has had her hand up. Lois, we'll go to Lois, and then we're going to hold it there because we are on the hook to adjourn at 7:30 to open the public hearing. Lois?
Yeah, just briefly, to follow up on what Dee was saying, as we get closer and we have more information, we think about how to present this, one thing we had talked about, that a couple of us were thinking about, is presenting some scenarios, some alternative scenarios, starting with the base case, and then very clearly stating what we're assuming to show the impact on these numbers of the financial impact of decisions that could be made at this town meeting or future town meetings. And that may be a way of getting at the issues that Dee was raising, and also of emphasizing to town meeting that they have power over what happens, that there's an impact of decisions that are made at town meeting. So we can talk about doing that as a way of presenting the information in our report and at town meeting, and it'll be based on more information as the year goes on.
Good, thank you.
Thank you, Lois. Okay, so much more to come on this. Thank you. Thank you to Lindsay and to Anthony and to everybody else who helped prepare this first look at this. This is really, really helpful and great work. And more to come on this as time goes on and we refine it. We have 6 minutes left. Few housekeeping items before we adjourn the regular meeting. The first is minutes. We have 3 sets of minutes. The joint meeting of December the 16th, the regular meeting of December the 16th, and then the regular meeting of December the 19th. I sent those out as an addendum to the packets. Why don't we take a look at those? Colin?
I've received one edit on one of the sets of minutes. This is from Peggy, and it was on the December 19 version. I haven't received any other edits besides those. What was sent out?
Okay, John?
Just a question, since we had a split vote, have we historically published how members vote or not?
Is that in reference to the guideline vote from our last
Yeah, in
meeting?
here we say, it was 9-4, then went 10-3, if I remember correctly, and I'm just asking historically, if it's not unanimous, do we outline how each member has voted or not? I'm just asking.
I don't think we have.
We don't?
I don't think we have.
I don't think so, John, but anyone who wants to watch the tape, you know, can go back and, yeah,
It's also a newspaper article.
it's a good question.
Just as a follow-up, that one edit on the December 19, and Don, this is something that you had written about. In the paragraph that talks about the Finance Committee guideline, in the middle of the paragraph that starts Ms. Rankin, in the middle of that, it says, the sentence starts, in response to a suggestion by Ms. Briggs that the schools revisit fees for school athletes. We're going to delete the word athletes and insert the word activities, parentheses, such as music and...
Not the parentheses.
Oh, okay. Just delete the word athletes and insert the word activities. So changing school athletes to school activities. That was the only edit that I have.
Okay. Any other revisions? Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion to approve these 3 sets of minutes as amended.
You have to do each one. You have to say each one.
I don't think we need to do a separate motion for each one.
No, just name them.
We just need to name them in the motion.
I'm going to abstain from the ones on the 16th because I wasn't there.
Okay.
So,
Well, then let's do them separately then.
Okay.
Okay. Okay.
You want to make a motion, Colin?
Peggy's going to do it.
Okay.
I move to approve the Concord Finance Committee meetings for December 16th, 2024. Finance Committee meeting, December 16th, 2024, joint committee meeting of Finance, Select, and School.
We'll just stop it there because she wants to do it different. Just stop those,
Okay.
just do those two, okay?
Okay.
Can
That's
we
the
get-
motion.
That's the motion. Can we get a second?
I second.
Thank you, Paul. Okay. And roll call vote. Any other discussion on that? Okay. Roll call vote on that. This is just the December 16th, 2 sets of minutes. Suresh Bhatia? No. Peggy Briggs?
Aye.
Kathy Kukalo? No. Eric Dahlberg?
Yes.
John Garofalo?
Yes.
Pat Geyer?
Yes.
Greg Gariello?
Abstain.
Abstain. Okay. Don Kupka?
Yes.
Lindsay Liss?
Yes.
Dee Ortner?
abstain.
Carlin Reed, yes. Paul Rodriguez?
Yes.
Kazi is not here. Shri Tupel?
Yes.
Lois Wassoff? Lois, how do you vote on the minutes for December 16, the 2 sets?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes.
Thank you. Okay, so that's 10 aye, 0 nay, 2 abstention. So that passes. Okay, now let's do the one for December 19th, please. Can I get a motion on the December 19th minutes, please?
I move that we approve the minutes for December 19th, 2024,
Second?
a meeting of the Finance Committee.
And Dia seconded. Thank you very much. Any discussion on that, on those minutes? All right, I'll do a roll call vote on that, of the people I know who are here. Peggy Briggs?
Aye.
Eric Dahlberg?
Yes.
John Garofalo?
Yes.
Pat Geyer?
Yes.
Greg Gariello?
Yes.
Don Kupka?
Yes.
Lindsay Liss?
Yes.
Dee Ortner?
Yes.
Carlin Reed, yes. Paul Rodriguez?
Yes.
Shri Tupel?
Yes.
Lois Wassoff?
Yes.
All right, that passed unanimously. Thank you. Thank you very much, all folks, and thank you, Don, also for your help on that.
These are excellent minutes and very timely.
They are,
Thank
yeah.
you.
Very
Okay.
impressive.
We're all caught up, okay.
Okay. We have we're actually at time, so very, very quickly before we adjourn, looking ahead to next meeting. As I mentioned, and I'm pulling up our schedule, a previous version of our schedule had our next meeting at February 27th. What I'd like to do is schedule an additional meeting between now and then for purposes of looking at the fiscal year 26 budgets, town and schools. So I'm working with town and school leadership to identify a date that works. I've got February 13th in there tentatively. That could change. I'll get back to folks as soon as possible to confirm that date or another date. It'll be at some point during the first half of the month of February. And that'll be, again, for purposes of reviewing fiscal year 26 budgets now that they're taking shape. With that, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Do we have a second?
D. Second.
All those in
Eric
favor?
is, yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
We don't need a roll call to adjourn. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Okay.
Aye.
Eric, is this the same call for the next meeting?
Same, yep, same call, same room. So we've adjourned the regular meeting of the Finance Committee. What we're now going to do is open up the public hearing on capital. So I will entertain a motion to open the public hearing.
So moved?
second by Peggy, and we'll do a roll call to open the public hearing.
Peggy Briggs? Eric Dalton?
Yes.
John Rockwell?
Here.
Pat Guyer?
Yes.
Greg Garriella?
Here.
Don here. Is it okay to open up the meeting?
Here.
It's not a present thing. Okay, good.
Yeah.
Don Kupka? All right.
Here.
Lindsay Liss?
Here.
Dee Ortner?
Yes.
Carlin Reed, yes. Paul Rodriguez?
Here.
Okay. Sri Tupel?
Yep.
Lois Wassoff?
Here.
Okay. All right, we're open.
Okay, so this is a public hearing on capital. I prepared a brief statement just to kick us off, and then I'll turn it over to Anthony to walk us through the plan. This public hearing is part of the enhanced capital planning process that we as a town have implemented and follows 3 joint capital planning meetings that we've had with the Select Board and School Committee in August, November, and December to understand and prioritize capital needs across town departments, CPS, and the high school. Tonight, we'd like to hear from Concord taxpayers on their priorities for capital projects. Before opening it up for public comment, I've invited town and school leaders to provide a very quick summary of projects on the plan, or in the plan. We just heard a detailed presentation on the projects back on December the 16th, so I'd like this to serve as a brief refresher after our holiday break. I expect the presentation to take no more than 15 minutes. I'll then invite FinCom members to pose any clarifying questions and then open it up for public input. Members of the public should limit their comments to 2 minutes. When the time comes, if you're in the room, please stand and line up at the microphone or raise your hand on the Zoom. After the Finance Committee closes the public hearing at the conclusion of public input, it's our intention to adjourn. We're not going to deliberate or vote on recommendations for specific capital projects at this time. That'll happen as part of our hearing process in the spring. I'll now hand it over to town and school leaders to make their presentations, starting with the town.
Thank you, Eric. All right, so before we start, I want to emphasize just a couple things. First, that this is not the final public hearing. There's a public hearing that's scheduled in April, which is the true public hearing on capital. So, this is still the draft. It's just another opportunity before, as we move along through the process, as you said, to allow residents to provide any comments that they'd like on the draft plan, because just today, we had a meeting and we had to adjust a few things. It's not reflected in your packet, and I can talk about them briefly, but once we adjust it, we'll bring it up at the next meeting too, just to let you know. So, and also, this is just the snapshot at FY26. You saw back in December, we have a 10-year plan that we put together, and that will be included in the digital budget book, but for the sake of saving a tree and not printing a lot of 10-year plans that is a lot of variables in those, we're just showing the FY26 plan. All right, so with that, first slide just talks about the funding sources, the various funding sources for the capital plan, and I'll just go starting at 12 o'clock and going counterclockwise. There's grant funding, there's capital outlay of $136,800. That together plus tier 1 is considered tier 1. Chapter 90 money, $650,000. The other, which is 1.374 million. Revolving funds at 1.6 and change. So tier 1, 2.8. Tier 2 is 4.3. And here's where the contingency plan comes in. That 4.3, there's $2 million of that is baked in for the roads. If the tier 3 was to fail, we still have to do roads. So we had to come up with a contingency plan to make sure that we maintain roads at least at our current pavement management index plan, or if we didn't do this, we would fall behind even worse. Oh, sorry, I went too quick there. And then the tier 3, it's the 4.3, initially it was $4.35 million. So by departments, police, 182,000, cemetery, 400,000, highway maintenance, 460,000, facilities, all town buildings, 750,000, fire department, 1,032,000, Concord Public Schools, just shy of $1.6 million, and engineering is, again, this is an inflated number because it's taken into consideration the contingency plan, but it's $10.7 million. So you've seen this chart before. This just breaks down everything, and I'm going to get into the projects, and I'll talk about them really briefly, and happy to go back and talk about any of these that you want to. So on the cemetery, we have the cemetery wall restoration project. That's $360,000. That's going to be funded through the cemetery funds. We have miscellaneous cemetery improvements, $30,000. Grave marker restoration, $10,000. Again, all those projects would be funded under that other category, and that total is $400,000. For facilities, we budgeted $750,000 for this capital plan. That would be a tier 2. Parks and trees at $10,000, it's just from small equipment. That would be into the capital outlay. Highway maintenance, so this has recently changed. So replace vehicle tire balancing machine. We actually are going to change that, keeping it the same dollar amount at $35,000, but it's going to be for more miscellaneous various equipment, and that would go into a capital outlay category. Replace a Freightliner big dump truck, $415,000. Small various equipment in the highway division, $10,000. Capital outlay. In the engineering, we have the asset management tool of $105,000. Traffic improvements of $420,000. Pedestrian bicycle safety. Originally, we have this at $935,000, which would be considered under tier 2, but recently today we're gonna decrease that by the $650,000, and we're gonna add that to the tier 3 road pavement project because there's a relationship there, and it's better suited under that tier 3 because it goes with the pavement project. So, which is a good thing because it'll decrease the debt within the levy. Road pavement management, $7 million. Again, it's $2 million would be the contingency plan if the $5 million fails at town meeting. We're still able to do those roads. Parking lot rehabilitation, $231,900. Culverts and bridges, $1.3 million. Again, there's another contingency baked into this because the culverts and bridges would fall under the stormwater utility fund. So therefore, where we don't, that's going to be something that's going to town meeting. So what we did there is we budgeted for $250,000 right now because we still have to make sure that we are able to repair a culvert that possibly fails. And then the additional $1 million would be part of debt service in the stormwater utility fund. Landfill monitoring, $29,800. That would be we put that under a capital outlay. Traffic signals and signage, that would be $366,000 and change. Road safety, $179,000 and change. Engineering street pavement markings, $107,000 and change, and it's under engineering. For the fire department, we have fire alarm receivers, $30,000. Ambulance replacement, it's $550,000. Keep in mind with this one is, what we needed to do is, this eventually would be paid from the ambulance revolving fund, but we needed to do a borrowing article, because in order to go out and try to procure an ambulance, I have to have a funding source. Now, the reason we're doing it now and not waiting the 2 years, because we need the funding source, but we don't expect the ambulance for 2 years. That's the lead time on ambulances. So in 2 years' time, the advanced life support is up and running. We would expect to pay for this cash out of that fund, and not, we would be sending the borrowing down the road. Fire apparatus refurbishments, $350,000. That's actually going to be funded, a big portion of that using ARPA. Townwide public access defibrillators, $42,000. Turnout gear, $60,000. For the police department, mobile radios for police cruisers, $25,000. Portable radios, $23,000. Body worn and in-car camera systems, $50,000. And that $50,000, the chief has a grant for that. I want to make mention of that. Another police Ford Interceptor, all-wheel drive hybrid, $60,000. Body armor vests, $24,000. For the library, it's some technology replacements for $15,000. They have a cargo van that's really at the end of life about 2 years ago, $58,000 and change. Computer replacements, this is an ongoing, so that's why we put that into capital outlay. That's $17,000. Natural resources, this again too is something that we do every year, $15,000, and that's why we put it within the capital outlay. It would be addition onto the operating budget. Resource sustainability, we have to update the climate action and resiliency plan for $75,000. And that's it on the town side. Before we go to the schools, and Laurie and Bob are online, I'm happy to answer any questions, and we have.
Why don't we go through all three presentations and then circle back with FinCom questions? And then actually what I may do is after we go through all three, open it up to the public. I don't get the sense there's going to be a lot of input based on the turnout in the room, but we'll then open it up to the public and then have FinCom discussion and questions.
Laurie, would you like that spreadsheet back up there?
Yes, that'd be great. And if someone could promote Bob, that would be great too.
I tried, he declined me. I don't take it personally. Bob, just raise your hand so I can find you. Thanks, Bob. You should be jumping on, and I forgive you for ignoring me.
He did it to me at school committee Tuesday night,
right,
so I
I'm
guess.
not taking it personally. Thanks, Laurie.
Exactly.
All right, 1 second.
Yeah, if you could put the spreadsheet back up, that'd be great.
Sure. You want page 2, Laurie, or?
I'm going to actually turn it over to Bob. So we haven't changed anything since you last saw this, so we can talk through the highlights for anyone else who didn't hear the first iterations of this. Bob, where would you like to start? Oh, did we lose him? He said he was having some technical issues. Why don't you go to the first page, Anthony, and I'll start, and he can hop on when his audio's back, I think.
Let me just promote him again. 1 second.
Great. Bob, can you hear us? I don't think he can hear us is, I think, the issue. All right, I will get started and hopefully he'll be able to hop on in a minute.
Thank you.
So high-level version, and I won't even get into all the details. You can see at Alcott, we're looking at really just performance management work for the HVAC and lighting. And again, some of these, let's do the color coding first. The green shading was for if we are able to access grant money or an energy performance management contract. So anything in green is still not necessarily something we're going to move forward because we want to have alternate funding options. But it's on the list. So HVAC and lighting, down the road, some plumbing perhaps at Alcott. At the middle school, obviously we're really in a good place there and don't need to consider anything this year, which is a nice change. So we're glad about that. At district level, we have some exterior things we were considering at Ripley. We need some office equipment district-wide. Copiers have become a big issue for us. So we'd like to use some capital funding to get back on track there. Out at the bus depot, we have some vehicle and fleet equipment needed. And so that's the Knox Trail money. And, oh, sorry, and then the Ripley part is asphalt and paving down the road. So it's minimal this year, and that was intentional on our part that we would like to keep it that way. If you go to the next slide, you'll see Thoreau's where the bigger number is. Thank you. So the roof is our focus at Thoreau. We've had a moisture water study done recently because we'd had some ongoing leaks. It's only for a portion of the building, especially the flat roof. The pitched roof is actually in good shape, sadly, because it was replaced in the fire a few years ago. But the flat roof, we've had some issues, and we're trying to understand the scope of the issues and whether we just need to do some larger scale repair work with some sort of sheathing, or if it's a whole roof replacement. That we might be able to look at MSBA funding for, or at least subsidy. So we're still in the throes of better understanding what that need is actually and what we're going to move forward. And then down below, we've got some needs in technology. The elementary schools have dated devices, and the interactive boards are dated. So we've got some in the operating budget, and this is additional to that to try to make some dent in that. We're not looking to do it all at once. That would be a really big request. In terms of vehicle, pickup truck for the bus mechanic, we're trying to slowly replace all our very old vehicles. So this is a 15-year-old vehicle. So that is on this list as well. Bob, are you able to hear us now?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, super.
Okay, I switched.
Why don't you do the wrap up now that we're.
Okay, sorry about that. I have some audio problems on my work PC that's being replaced. I'm on my home PC now. So thanks for your patience. A couple quick things. The sustainability related items that are highlighted in green are items that we will pursue in the short term only if we can find a method of funding them that doesn't require the budget. For example, an energy performance contract where the savings offset the capital costs.
Yeah, I did mention that while you were.
Yeah. We did have to pull one of those projects in because it was critical to support the servers. That's $500,000 of equipment, and it's about $15,000 in HVAC costs. So that was when we prioritized. We've also summarized our capital by tier 1 and tier 2. So the projects that are over 250,000 of the ones Lori's just gone through, that includes the irrigation at the middle school for 400,000, and that includes the Thoreau roof for 250,000. The total tier 2 is 650,000. The tier 1 is 291,570. Various smaller items. A lot of what we had initially came from a report from consultants to look at all of our elementary buildings in Ripley. We really focused on the elementary buildings. Obviously, with the new middle school, that's not a priority. And so that's kind of how we arrived where we are. I think that's.
The only thing I'd pick up on, I didn't really talk about the irrigation. I just want to note that that is not currently in the building project. We may be able down the road, once the project is further, and by further, I mean probably demolition, because that's where the last possible options for unknowns could happen. You know, I know Anthony's interested in having some discussion of whether that irrigation gets moved over to the building project funding, but because we weren't sure and we need to do this, we've put it in this plan for the time being, just to be sure we're able to move it forward and sync it up with the construction of the fields, because it's certainly more cost effective to do that.
Question?
I think those are the highlights.
When do we do questions?
Okay, thank you very much. We're going to do questions, D, once we've heard
The
from
end?
all
All
three
of them?
budget units. And
Okay.
then, actually, then I'd like to open it up to the public and then have discussion and questions, just in the interest of time.
All right.
Okay, high school.
So for the high school, and Bob, I think, is going to pull up the memo that we have talked with the school committee about, and the most recent study that is now turning into a design of the amenities building. So at the high school, we're not in a place where we have large capital needs at the building. The anniversary of the building will be 10 years in April. That's still within the window of a little proactive maintenance and repairs here and there, put you in a pretty good place to not have large costs. We know that the end of that timeline is coming, so we'll be looking at a facility study in probably a couple of years. We think we've got a little longer we can wait. So that means right now there's no massive capital plan in place. The main focus this year is on the campus itself and continuing to try to work through all the visionary and needed projects that are on the horizon here for the campus. So the road was paved. That was the first one that needed to happen. That being complete after so long is finally allowing us to talk on the other things. So I will highlight them, and then I'm going to turn over to Bob to go through a couple of highlights of the study on the amenities building. So the amenities buildings are the restrooms and potentially a very small snack space down at Memorial Field. I know folks are fairly familiar given last year's discussions. We funded out of some funds at the region a schematic plan, and now we're in the design phase. So we funded that so we'd have more information. Bob will go through the results of the schematic, which led to the school committee selecting among the choices. And now we're getting a design built, which will inform what in bid might come in at. There's also some updates to share with you on the committee's discussion of funding options. I know Julie Viola is there in person as chair of the region, and we can update you even as soon as Tuesday night, some of the moving pieces there. So we should return to the amenities building. The other things are down the road. We do have a vision of an outdoor track at the Walden Street entrance. We are intending on fully funding that privately, so we're working on some upstarts to that. And then just on the radar, and you've heard this through the Doug White conversation, Memorial Field is in its last couple of years. It's not quite as at the same state as Doug White, but we don't want it to not be known and make sure that people understand it's coming. We will have turf replacement costs there, probably 27 or so, FY 27 or so. So those are the big buckets. I think we should go back to the amenities building, and that's probably the most important of the topics tonight. Bob, can you pull up the options and talk through where the school committee's at?
Yes, so I'm on my home PC. Anthony, are you able to pull up that slide of the amenities building?
We have already, Bob, not to cut you off, we have already seen these, so you can
Okay.
accelerate.
Okay, so I'll summarize the options we talked about. I think that when we presented to you, I don't know if I can't recall whether we had selected an option or not. So we did select, the school committee selected an option at a recent meeting, late December, mid to late December. And it's the option for a concrete block permanent building, which is estimated to have about a 50-year life. The cost, I don't have it in front of me, it's about 1.3 to 1.8. It's a broad range. We anticipate getting that refined. As you go through the design process, you get more specificity on what the costs are. So we've worked with Gale and Associates and their subcontractor. The kind of driving reason and for the option we selected was a 50-year life versus a 10-year life on the kind of the shorter term options, less durable options. And we're not looking at like permanently heating this building. So option that we selected, the architectural concrete blocks, we don't need to build it with wood in a way that would enable heating year round. The use is intended to be shut down in the winter when we don't have outdoor sports activities. So the next day, this process will move forward with the consultants getting a little bit more specificity on the design. We have a rough idea. I do want to say too that the plumbing code was updated as we mentioned before, so that's resulted in a little bit less size that we've needed to build. They've already looked at the infrastructure costs, so we're at a point where they're going to be coming to us with some very specific questions. We'll give them feedback, and within 90 days we anticipate having a design and documents that can be provided for a construction bid process. The funding piece we'll talk about at the end in terms of how we fund it. We're looking at various funding sources. And I also do want to clarify, last time there was a question at our presentation, I think from FinCom, about are there choices we can make to manage to the lower end of this? We are making those choices. We already have made those choices. The addition of the trainer's room that we talked about, it's within the existing footprint. It adds very little cost, if any. And then the kitchen that we're looking at, when we say kitchen, we're talking about a place to put, an outlet that you can plug something into. We're not talking about building appliances or anything. So I just want to be clear when that question came up that we are doing what we can to minimize the cost.
I think I would just add to that the school committee is engaged with a number of other options that may or may not play out. We won't know. On Tuesday night, there's a discussion with the CPC about possibly, we don't know. They're at least willing to talk with us about it, about reopening the applications for FY26 so that the regional committee could apply for some funds there. Tuesday night at the school committee meeting, we also had a discussion with John Boynton, who's one of the last remaining CC at Play board members. There's 2 remaining of the original project. And for those who aren't familiar, CC at Play was the private fundraising entity that raised $5 million plus for the fields at the high school when they weren't included in the building project. So that they've remained, the organizations remained in place, not with any funds in it, but the structure's there. So there was some discussion about interest in whether the private option might be a potential. So the school committee actually formed a subcommittee the other night that's going to start meeting to talk through all these moving pieces and try to decide what direction to go. That said, the warrants are going to close before all this is really settled and resolved. So there is likely going to be a placeholder warrant article of some kind while they work through all the moving options and hopefully revenue sources. So I think that's where we're at. Big picture, it's moving along and trying to really minimize the taxpayer burden on this project so we can get it done successfully.
Okay, thank you very much, Laurie and Bob. With that, why don't we open it up to the public if we have any public input or public comment or questions on the projects that we just heard about from the town and the 2 school districts. Anyone here in the room want to provide input? How about online? Any hands raised? Okay. With that, any questions from members of the Finance Committee? Dee.
Yep. This is about the CMS and the irrigation system. that you're looking at right now, and I'm wondering, what is your source of water?
There's a well there, Dee. That's the good news. There is a
Okay.
well that's sitting and available. It's dormant at the moment because of the construction, but it's available to be connected.
Okay, so do you have to work with the town on just notifying them about the use of the well in the future?
Oh, sure, yes. We had to work with them to temporarily decommission it. We'll certainly have to work with them to activate it again and use it for any irrigation.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Peggy?
Yeah, I'm trying to, well, I'm looking at the page that we were looking at before with the yellow list in the middle, 2026 projected. And I'm looking at the debt service within levy limit, which I assume is tier 2, and possibly some tier 1. But that's up $1 million from last year for town principal and interest, and about even, well, up about 100,000 for CPS principal and interest. And I can't quite square the rest of the discussion and the ins and outs to those numbers. So it would be very helpful, if possible, in another meeting, not right on the fly, but to tally up the $4,533,000 town principal and interest A1, A2 CPS principal and interest 904,470, and then also Anthony, you're sort of straight lining expenses following 2026. You mentioned, we talked about that earlier, but 26, is a real bump up, and it looks like you straight line those numbers based on 25, not 26. So I'd be interested in your thinking on that. Again,
It's based on the debt service schedule from our financial advisor, Hilltop. So it's added debt on for capital projects for 2 years ago, or 24, and it's decreasing debt. So those right now are accurate. It's no projection. That's exactly the funding schedule.
okay. I think it's misleading, and I think the tax impact is also misleading, and I'm concerned about even presenting something that drops off so substantially when we all know that's not going to happen. And I think, Dee, you kind of were getting at that on the tax impact table, where we're going from 6% down to some pretty low numbers, 1.632, et cetera. I mean, we know that's not going to happen, and I think even presenting that without some more realistic inputs, Anthony, I know that's what you have in hand, but we also know that I just feel like we should be inserting either some capital numbers, tier 1, tier 2, and to make it more realistic. That's my main point.
So you're right.
Second point is, I think that the uptick of $1 million on the town's tier 1 and tier 2 capital number is very high, and I'd love to see some reduction, substantial reduction on that number, especially in the, second choice, third choice kind of columns.
So you're right, 27, we're going to add the debt that we have from 25. But we don't account for that because, first of all, just because we ask for, say, $4 million in borrowing, capital projects may come in under, right? So we based on the amount that we spent. So we don't borrow the money and then let it just sit there and you're paying interest on money that we have sitting in an account. We're only borrowing for what we know at the time when we go out to borrow. So the only thing I could project is I could project last year's number, which I think we were at $4.5 million in debt within tier 1, but I don't know that we're going to need that. I don't know if they're going to get to all the projects. So I understand what you're saying. You're right. 27, the debt service is going to be increased on whatever it is we need to borrow based on whatever the projects we were able to get to.
Thank you.
Let's go. I see Pat's had her hand up online, and then we'll come back to you, Colin. Pat, online.
Yes, thank you. Just to follow up for Peggy, but that's where I think we're, Anthony, thinking about scenarios. I speak to you, Anthony, but really to the whole crowd. That maybe, again, we can think of different scenarios and put them out so we have a town meeting that actually sees the impact on these things. So that's one thought. Anthony, this may seem trivial, but I'm very curious. Have you, now that we've combined all the town and the schools' capital needs, have we examined the cost of consultants or facility studies in a way that we could actually save some money there? Do you know how much we spend for consulting and facility studies, even just for the town, let alone for all of us? For all entities?
Yeah, Pat, a good question. So if you look at our facilities, and I don't have it in front of me right now, but if you looked at our facilities request, it was a lot greater. And what they did is, they were assuming, $650,000 roof at, I'm just going to say at the BD Center, even though that's an enterprise fund and it's a different story. But I didn't put those in the capital plan for funding because we're not going to go on guesses. When you have a project that's over a certain dollar amount, Mass General Law requires you to do what we call a study, feasibility study or anything else. So what we're only going to fund is studies to determine the accurate cost, not going and just projecting some numbers that could be high. So what we're looking at is just the study. So of that $750,000, the only thing that we are studying and have accounted for is to replace the kitchen at the Harvey Wheeler. So that is the only project that we said, we're not going to give you $750,000 for a kitchen because that's a guess. What we're going to give you is, what you have to go through is you have to go design, bid, build. That's Mass General Law. So we'll give you the money for design this year, and then when you come back and have a refined number, then we can present that to town meeting.
Okay, thank you.
Colin.
I have two areas. One is looking at the roads request of $7 million, which is the biggest request. But the one I want to talk about first is the way that these 34 items were prioritized. I noticed that there was a ranking system with a 1, a 2, and a 3 for these 34 requests. And of the 34 requests, 20 were given a number 1, which is imperative. 11 received a number 2, which is essential, and 3 received a number 3, which is important. If you took off the number 2 and 3 requests and you exclude from that the cemeteries portion, because that's coming out of the cemeteries fund, and the CPS schools, which is a tier 3 apparently, or not a ranking 3, if you keep those back in the mix, you could subtract a little over $1 million from this capital request. And this $15 million request is huge. I'm trying to find some way to suggest that the town reconsider how much money they want to add to the debt service through the capital plan, through the capital improvement plan. So my recommendation is go back and look at those tier 2s and 3s. Again, keep in cemetery, keep in the schools. And then by school I mean CPS. Keep those in, but see if you really need to do this year the tier 2, the priority number 2 capital requests. That's the first piece I'm going to suggest you do. Unless you want to talk now about how you ranked them or what's the meaning behind the 1, 2, and 3 ranking that's contained in that. If you want to address that now, that's fine. Otherwise, that's just a basic comment.
Yeah, if I could have excluded that, I would have excluded that, because this year was the first year we used a new program called ClearGov, and I think there was a little bit of a learning curve for all of us. So I'm not quite sure that the 1s and the 2s are accurate. So when we sat down and we discussed all these projects, these were the ones that were determined to be the most important for the town to deal with during FY26. So bear with us on that, because we have some growing pains into that new program that we're working with.
No, I think ranking the 34 projects is important. And I'm not contesting how the ranking was done. I'm just saying, if we're going to try and reduce it at all, that would be the place to look at, is the number 2s and 3s, and just go with the number 1s.
Normally,
That's the first piece.
that's what happens, and it's not 15 million, it would go down to 13 million, because the $2 million is a contingency, so although it's 15, it wouldn't be 15, it would either be 13 or it would be 15, depending on
Gotcha.
the outcome of town meeting.
Okay, all right, the second piece was, let's take a look at that $7 million road project. I
It's
know.
5 million or 2 million. It's a 5 million debt exclusion tier 3 project, or a 2 million if that fails. It's not total 7 million.
Well, actually, it sounds like it's more. It sounds like it's more like $25 million. Now, let me understand how this is going to play out. Based on the wording of your presentation, we're going to be committed to a 5-year program, each year $5 million added to the roads improvement project. So if we vote and this is going to be a tier 3 warrant article. Am I understanding correctly how the mechanism is going to work? That there's going to be a warrant article that says $25 million bond authorization in 5-year chunks. So as one of our scenarios, you're nodding your head saying, okay, so that's what we're expecting to see at town meeting. What that means is we could do a scenario that assumes that particular tier 3 warrant article is passed as one of our scenarios. Is that right?
Yeah, so that's what we're doing. So we talked about it today, and I know Public Works is hard at work, and Sven's here, and he's hard at work, working what that plan's gonna be. So we're hoping to really show something. We're gonna look at a draft presentation in a couple of weeks, and shortly thereafter, we're gonna have a plan on what that's gonna be. So town meeting knows exactly what they're gonna be voting on, and what our schedule is, and what we're gonna try to attack in certain years. And we're gonna have, if we did it 5 years, maybe we wanted to ramp it up 1 year because there's a reason for it. So we're still working through the mechanics of that right now, but so we don't have an answer, but we do know what's been talked about since last year is we're looking for $25 million for tier 3 road projects over 5 years. Split up over 5 years.
That's all I have. Thank you.
Okay.
Can I just follow up on that? I don't see that in this chart. Tier 3 schools, debt service excluded from the levy limit, B1, town principal and interest 295. Does that include the roads?
No, that's not what was passed at town meeting yet, so we still have to work through that. As we work through the whole estimate, then again, the financial forecast is a living, breathing document. It has been since August. It's going to continue as we get more information. It's going to continuously change.
Okay, I understand that, Anthony. It's just, to me, it doesn't feel.
We're not trying to hide anything, Peggy.
I understand that. It's just, it's just not there.
It's because we don't know yet.
We're talking about it in one presentation, but maybe we need a different financial forecast that includes town meeting requests or proposals or
And
something.
those town meeting hearings are scheduled for April.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I think Sven has a follow-up on the roads question, and then we have some hands raised online.
Yes, Sven Weber, 50 Belknap Street, Chair of Public Works. So I think we from Public Works were quite transparent over a long time that, as you pointed out, Colleen, this is a $25 million project over 5 years. If we continue at the $2 million level per year, our roads are getting worse and worse and worse. It's not enough to keep the low 70 PCI level we have right now. So that would strip low very, very quickly. The $25 million project would bring us in the low 80 PCI level, and after a 5-year period, we would switch back to a $2 million per year maintenance program. So it is just to be able to get the streets at a level where $2 million per year is sustaining the quality of the roads. If we don't do that, we are losing significant infrastructure. We also have the scenario calculated, and we know already for 2.5 years, if we push the $25 million out by 5 years, the cost will balloon to something like $60 million to repair the streets. And we are already 2.5 years into that 5-year period. So we are stretching that cost, and I hope we can stay within the $25 million. So that's one thing. The other one I want to add is, and that was the discussion this morning, is we are looking in efficiencies and how we deploy the capital specific between the roads program and the safety program. That the idea is when we touch a road for the road program, we immediately also do the safety programs where we have long lists in a transportation advisory committee and the safety management group of things that need to be touched. That these are not separate projects, but we put them together into one project so we can deal with the road and the traffic and pedestrian safety at the same time. So we are looking at these synergies at the same time.
Thank you. Suresh, you had your hands up at one point. Do you have a question?
No, I think I'm all set for now.
Okay. Dawn.
Thanks.
Yeah, thank you. I want to build on what Peggy was saying and also what Sven was just saying. I think we have we have a great need. I think we need to present to the taxpayers the total package. So I'm hoping that this is a single warrant article for 5 years at $5 million a year. So it's a single warrant article of $25 million. And then for the forecast, it would be really helpful, in our analysis, our description of this recommendation, we can present the tax impact. So that means going back to that forecast, lines A1, debt service within levy limit and debt service excluded, and showing what the impact on each on those lines would be, assuming it's $5 million each year, incrementally added on top. I'd love to see that. I don't have a clue how long we would borrow the money for, but if it's 5-year loans, it's going to be a huge impact. So I'd love to. I'd love to be sure that we present that data as well to the community. Thank you.
Yeah, can I just add, because Dawn's absolutely right, but I was asked to talk about this forecast today, or the 11th hour, so I didn't have a chance to update it. We didn't reflect anything. Tonight's plan was to talk about the FY16 capital plan. As far as all the funding stuff, there's still work to be done with that and to adjust the forecast. So you're right, Dawn, yes.
Okay, Mary.
Thank you. I have a question about the debt service for the excluded debt for the middle school, or for the schools. That number boggles around quite a bit, bounces around a bit. Did you embed in those numbers any application of the debt stabilization fund? Because I know we have what do we have, a 3 or 5? I forget. How much do we have in the debt stabilization fund?
It's about $5 million.
$5 million. So did you embed that in that number?
No, we add, that's going to be coming on next year. We would
Right.
decrease that to maintain it at the flat level. So no, there are still little adjustments that have to be done.
So
there.
next year, I think you are forecasting 7.2 million in excluded debt service. So I just want to bring it up that we have $5 million to help us smooth that. That's not in your numbers.
That's right. That's not in that. It's not in that spreadsheet. You're right, Mary.
I have a question on the amenities building. I know that things are kind of pending. It sounds like you're still pursuing CPC for fiscal year 26. And did I follow correctly? If that doesn't work out, your intention is to bring it to town meeting for fiscal year 26.
I'll start that answer, but Julie might be the better person to talk to as she's getting up. Maybe. I think that's what they're still sorting out. So Julie should take it from there.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think we obviously have to file it in both towns. The trickiest thing on the amenities building is that Carlisle CPC just opened and it closes in February. Concord is long past, and we didn't get the plan. So I think it's multifaceted, so we're at least going to make an ask to open it up next week. As Lori mentioned, we are going to write the warrants, and if we have to withdraw them because we do find out that we can get CPC funds, then we will do so. I think just for me personally, because I was going to ask this question, I think it goes, this is more of a macro question for the FinCom. Is there a standard approach to fundraising in the town of Concord? Meaning, what projects there's an expectation on fundraising? Obviously, you're not going to do fundraising for roads, but is there a general philosophy of what kind of projects get fundraised versus go to a capital planning process?
Do you mean private fundraising?
Yeah.
I am not aware of anything, certainly not a documented policy.
Okay. I'm just asking,
whatever possible.
No, because I'm asking because I know the tax question comes up a lot. We hear it a lot, and there's in both towns. Obviously, I'm a Carlilian. I'm a recent Carlilian, so I'm learning from people of just this expectation. There's just the surprise of how much fundraising we do in both communities, and not always about the schools, but I'm just happen to be coming in through that lens. So I didn't know if there was a philosophy, because I think right out of the gate around like the track, for example, we've already been pushed, well, you're going to fundraise this. So I was just surprised, given that it's a project and we're happy to do it, and we're really happy that CC at Play has come out. But I just didn't know if there was a standard process for it, because when I look at other projects in town, that doesn't come up a lot, but it does with the schools. And I'm very grateful for both towns' contributions to the schools. I just didn't know if there was a philosophy just to set expectations with parents when they come to me with like, wait a minute, I just paid my tax bill, and now I'm trying to fundraise. It's been an interesting discussion when we're talking about toilets where their children and grandparents and multi-generational people show up to watch a game and there's no bathrooms except for porta potties. So I just wanted to see if there was a general philosophy. But if there's not, that's okay.
Oh, I have a question for you.
Yeah.
What is Carlisle thinking about with regards to the costs of the amenities building?
So we're going to apply for CPC funds, as Lori started to mention. Right. That opened. We've given them the estimate that Bob talked about, between 1.3 and 1.8, knowing that we'll get roughly the 25% of that bill. Most people that we've talked to are in support of it.
Okay.
Now, that's based on me going out, talking to people at Pickup, talking to people at the library, talking to people at Ferns. It's word of mouth. I can't tell you I did a huge poll of all 4,500 residents.
So do you see any opportunities in Carlisle for fundraising for your 25% or
So
whatever,
that's the thing about-
23.5, whatever it
Well,
is?
so that's the thing about the CC at Play, is that it's agnostic, right? It's both communities, and that's what's great about it.
Yeah.
So if there's somebody in Carlisle that really wants bathrooms at the high school, great. If there's somebody in Concord, if there's an alum that lives in Georgia, we'll take their money too. That's right. I mean, that's kind of the approach. That's a great thing. Yeah, I don't know, Dr. Hunter, if I missed anything.
I don't think so. It's all just moving, I think, with the intent of doing what I think the Finance Committee and others have asked of us, is to see if there's other funding sources.
Yeah.
So hopefully, Julie's right. I think we're just trying to name that that's been the goal, and there's some active moving pieces that we aren't sure where they're going to land.
Yeah. I mean, at the end of the day, like, we want to make the building happen. We've heard specifically around the ADA concerns, and we want to act on it, but we also want to make sure that there's not a huge burden on the taxpayer. So we're leaving no stone unturned. So any other questions?
So I would comment as an answer to your question.
Yeah.
I would punt, as a Finance Committee member,
yeah,
I would punt that policy question right up to the Select Board. It's outside of our pay grade.
That's fine.
So if Mary wants to respond to that.
No, the only reason I ask is I come from Andover. I grew born and raised. I sold my house to come to Carlisle about 5 years ago. I worked for the town of Andover. I was very involved in a lot of different things. So, like, I'll give you an example of, we had a group of kids that were really excited about a skateboarding park. They brought it to town meeting. It failed. Skateboarding park, I would say, is, and coming from somebody who worked at it and was an active skateboarder, it was great. But that was something we could say, well, we're going to fundraise for this. and we did. But I'm just trying to figure out the philosophy in the town of Concord specifically around fundraising for what projects and which ones kind of, if it's just something we just talk about at these kinds of meetings, or if there's a philosophy. And it might be something we might want to look at through a more formal lens, and if Mary and I need to talk and others need to talk, that I hear you loud and clear. But I think that's kind of the expectation, especially when you pay taxes as high as you do in the, I'm just going to say for Concord and Carlisle. I think some people are like, wow, it's a lot of fundraising. We're fundraising at Thoreau, we fundraised it recently at Carlisle. Now we're doing toilets. I'm just going to call it what it is. I know there's a snack bar. I'm not trying to diminish that. So just trying to figure out philosophy, and maybe next steps is looking into
Or the track.
Well, the track, I mean, that one was just like immediately we're going to fundraise, and we're fine to do that. We have a group of people that are excited about it, but I'm just trying to read the vibe in the town and match it as much as I can. So.
Good luck.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you so much. Did I answer your question?
Yes,
Okay.
thank you. Thank you. I see Dawn. We are, we're winding down here. We're approaching our time, but I see Dawn has his hand up. Dawn.
Yeah, thanks, Eric. Julie, I just wanted to provide a little bit of context. In my time in Concord, we fundraised for the expansion of the public library, for example. That I don't know if that was entirely paid for outside of the taxpayers or not, but certainly there was substantial private funds donated there, and that the town. I think of it this way: sort of our town operating budget and is providing the facilities and the operations for the ongoing operation of the building of the town, not for necessarily for additional things. We always talk about a level services kind of a budget. And within when anything else comes along, there's always, outside of the schools, there's always a look to see what other sources of funds can we tap into to help pay for it. So I hope that provides some context. Thanks.
Don, I think it sounds like you are aware of this, but the town does not own the library. It's owned by a separate corporation, so that's why it was separately fundraised.
Yeah, I am aware of that, but it is also the Concord Free Public Library. So, yeah.
Suresh, so you have your hand back up.
Yeah, one point for Don. I think that one of the other buildings that was fundraised was the BD Center, if I recall. And another, just a quick comment for the superintendent. If I recall, the town meeting when they approved the money for the middle school, the irrigation was not included in the project scope and budget. Am I correct in assuming that, or I'm going back by recollection?
Yeah, no, that is correct. The irrigation is not included.
So in case you want to use the funds for the, if there are any leftover funds, do we need to have a town meeting approval for that? Because you don't want to be at the last minute stuck with the fact it's not a, town meeting article and you need the money. It's better be forethought that, okay, at least we have it. We can withdraw the article if you get the CPS funds, but at least not be in a position where you don't need one, you don't have something to go with.
Yeah, thank you. Great question. As we are structured right now, the middle school building committee could approve it if we put it in front of them. They've got the approvals still technically while the project's still active. So we didn't want to do that at this point because while we have a lot of contingency left, which is great news, we didn't want to almost jinx ourselves, or demolition can be, I lived a project, we were under budget until demolition because we found stuff in the building that needed mitigation and things like that. So we wanted to get a little farther in before we did that.
And the second question was on the facilities building, said the range is 1.3 to 1.8. Are you planning, it said 90 days, are you planning to go out for bid now, or are you planning to go out for bid after town meeting?
We can't go out to bid until funding is secured.
Right.
Right. So are you planning to go like subject to funding approval or going after funding approval?
I don't think we're that far along yet because of all the moving pieces on the funding, and they're actively constructing the design for us, which we would need the design to go to bid. All of those pieces are going to have to be talked through as to both timing and, you know, subsidy if the funding's in place.
Okay, thank you.
Good question.
Mary, did you want to say something before we wrap up?
I've had a minute to think about the ball that you threw my way, Peggy. The select board's role is to accept gifts. The select board's role is not to solicit gifts. I will say that this year, as far as fundraising, the big effort that we've had in town is for the 250th for fundraising. And the town and the select board has agreed to cover some of the public safety expenses. But again, our role is to accept gifts, but not to go out and solicit.
Thank you. Okay, I see we're at time. I appreciate the presentations. Thank you to Anthony, Laurie, Bob, and Julie. And thanks to the Finance Committee for the questions and discussion. This is the first time the town's doing it this way, looking at capital in a unified way across the budget units. So it's a good learning experience, and I think we got some good. We have a hand up. Good lessons learned for the remainder of this year and in future years. We do have a hand up.
Janet Miller.
Janet, did you have input for us?
Yes, well, I'm just unmuting. There was a question about philosophy fundraising, and I was just thinking that a few years back there was a task force, I think, about public-private partnerships, and maybe that could give some guidance of how, you know, fundraising might be controlled. I mean, I don't think, you know, citizens should be able to just fundraise for something that the town doesn't want. That's what I was thinking.
Thank you, Janet. Good suggestion. Anyone else with their hand up online?
No.
Okay, with that, I will entertain a motion to close the public hearing and adjourn.
So moved.
Do we have a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, we are adjourned.